This is the border between Finland and Russia. It's 340 kilometers in length, and alongside this border are multiple military bases. Biggest of all, though, is this Russian military base located just 60 kilometers from Finland's current border. Interestingly, this formerly abandoned base sits on land that was once part of Finland. This base was reopened in 2015 and is said to now host over 3,000 soldiers and a rumored intelligence unit with the capability to track military, maritime, and air movements, among other things. What this base represents is Russia's expansion into the Arctic, an expansion that's been going on for years but hasn't been seen as a threat to Finland until now. See, historically, relations between these two nations have been a calculated play of diplomacy, compromise, and sometimes tension to avoid the unthinkable. But with the recent events in Ukraine, Russia's actions towards non-native states in the Eastern Bloc have become a serious concern for Finland. After all, Russia didn't take long to mobilize their own ground troops along their border with Ukraine before a heavy invasion. Even if the Al-Kurdi base isn't used to gather troops for the 60-kilometer track into Finland, it's a convenient launch site should the Kremlin decide to retaliate against any Western powers by using Finland as a target. I know it sounds absolutely insane, but if Putin's invasion into Ukraine has taught observers anything, it's that he's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure his vision of a strong, non-Western influenced Eastern Bloc is realized. Thought Finland would seriously be part of that mission? Well, it's looking a little more likely with every statement about NATO and Finland the Kremlin makes. After all, Finland, despite having close ties with NATO, are not members of it, so they don't benefit from the collective defense article. But if that's the case, then why has Russia not invaded Finland yet? Well, the answer lies in how Finland has handled Moscow since the last invasion. You see, back in 1939, the Soviet Union was testing its strengths, so Joseph Stalin insisted that the Finnish border be moved back 16 kilometers to create a buffer zone against any German attacks on Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. He also demanded a bunch of islands that would be used as naval bases. Finland said no, so the Red Army invaded with 500,000 soldiers. Many comparisons can be drawn from this war to the current war with Russia and Ukraine. But anyway, things ended with Finland eventually having to give up 11% of its territory, though it remained independent and fought the Russians again during World War II. Since then, however, the two have enjoyed a stable relationship, and Finland has worked hard not to pick a fight. Instead, they've used other ways to grow closer to the West, while keeping the Kremlin relatively calm. For one, back when they were bound by the 1947 Paris Peace Treaties and couldn't join the EU NATO, or the European Free Trade Association, which was like the EU for people who weren't part of the EU or any other organization that Moscow felt leaned in favor of the West. Finland sidestepped the red tape. But how? By setting up FINEFTA, or the Finland European Free Trade Association. They also set up a dummy version of Comecon, or the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, an economic organization for Soviet states set up by Stalin. Finland never used this dummy organization, but they did use it to engage with the European Free Trade Association and further build connections with Western countries like Switzerland, Norway, Denmark, and the United Kingdom. They also entered a neutrality deal with the Soviet Union that kept them out of harm's way and under the radar during the Cold War. Finland even rejected funding from the Marshall Plan, an American initiative that sought to rebuild Europe and fund democracy in the region. Once the 90s rolled around, Finland was free and joined the European Union in 1995, back when Russia was too weak from the fall of the Soviet Union to really oppose them. This not only boosted the Finnish economy tremendously, and created trade and strategic relations, but it gave them a secret, not-so-secret weapon that is pretty important. And keep that in mind, because I'll get to that just a bit later. But anyway, modern-day relations between the two countries consist of the presidents visiting each other and playing ice hockey while discussing world-changing topics, mostly because they have an understanding. Don't join NATO. Finland has repeatedly shut down any rumors of attempts to join NATO in the past, and destabilizing peaceful relations with Russia was enough of a reason, or at least it used to be. Finland has spoken out against the senseless war with Ukraine, as well as how they plan to navigate the new climate in Europe. President Sauli Niinistö has been pretty open with his opinion on joining NATO, given their political tensions earlier this year. Before the invasion, he stated that, quote, Finland's room to maneuver and freedom of choice also include the possibility of military alignment and of applying for NATO membership, should we ourselves so decide. After Putin invaded Ukraine, the president's stance hardly changed. He even put the decision in the hands of the Finnish leadership and people, saying, quote, it's up to Finland. So, what do the Finnish people think? Well, it depends on when you ask them. Back in 2014, after Russia annexed Crimea, only 18 to 21% of the general Finnish public thought Finland needed to join NATO as a means of protection. Things were pretty chill. Fast forward to January 2022, when Russian troops surrounded their shared borders with Ukraine. Finnish support for joining NATO jumped to 28%. Fast forward again to March of 2022, nearly 53% of the country believed joining NATO was a good idea. Clearly, there is a growing trend to join NATO, pushed by fear. And when you look at it, this decision would maybe make sense. Finland is sort of already part of NATO without actually being part of it, seeing they already conduct military exercises with NATO and allow NATO troops to do the same within their borders. They often share military intelligence with the treaty group, and Finnish leaders have often reiterated that they are part of the West. Finland is also part of NATO's Partnership for Peace program, which creates diplomatic ties between NATO members and non-NATO Euro-Atlantic states. These states can share and contribute to defense planning and military-to-military training, cooperation, and exercises, along with Ukraine and 4 other nations. Finland also has a special enhanced opportunity partnership with NATO, which basically means they can participate in NATO military security operations based on their capabilities. Finland even sent troops to Afghanistan in 2015 as part of NATO's Operation Resolute Support, which was meant to train, assist, and advise Afghan security forces who fought against terrorist cells in the region. So, they basically already have their foot in the door, except they don't. And when you look deeper into the Kremlin's words and the careful analyzing the Finnish leadership has done over the years, you'll see why. Here is a quote from Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Zakharova that might put things into perspective. It's obvious that if Finland and Sweden join NATO, which is first of all a military organization, it will entail serious military political consequences, which would require retaliatory steps by the Russian Federation. But to really knock this point home, we need to go back to 2016. This is 2 years after the annexation of Crimea, and Putin visited Finland. Understandably, Finland had increased military cooperation with NATO after what happened in Crimea. In response to this, however, Putin said, quote, "What do you think we will do in this situation? We moved our forces back 1,500 kilometers away. Will we keep our forces there? How? They are sure the safety and independence of their own country is the Finns' choice. Undoubtedly, we appreciate Finland's neutral status. Despite all of this, Finland appears calm about the whole situation. They dismissed any comments about retaliatory measures as simple statements. And the Kremlin hasn't been known to follow through on such threats. They promised retaliation when Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania joined NATO, but that was a bluff. Even if their diplomatic tiptoeing doesn't work out, Finland is not defenseless. They have the benefit of being an active member of the European Union. And here's where the secret, not so secret, weapon comes in. If you're thinking that the European Union is just an economic arrangement, then you're almost right. See, the EU has this clause known as the Mutual Defense Clause, and this clause in particular might be a major reason for the Kremlin's reluctance to invade Finland as it did with Ukraine. The clause states that if a member state is faced with any armed aggression or is the victim of a terrorist attack, then other member states have an obligation to aid and assist according to UN Charter guidelines. It might not be as set in stone as NATO's Collective Defense Clause, but it shows that Finland would be a force to be reckoned with, even if the 1939 Soviet invasion didn't get the message across enough. So, while the Kremlin's words might be frightening, Finland has been navigating these waters for a while. And while Ukraine serves as a reason for other Eastern European states to scramble to NATO protection, Finland is still taking its time, considering all of its options in avoiding a Russian invasion. And, most of all, maintaining as much peace as they currently can. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.